you feel it? Something here now seems to whisper your name. It is not noise, not coincidence, not another message wrapped in empty promises. It is that invisible hinge where your life, without announcements or fireworks, began to turn. You look around and everything appears the same. Walls, routines, familiar voices, yet inside the axis has shifted. The world did not move, you did. And this slight misalignment between what you sense and what you see is the first signal that your reality has opened a seam, inviting a new you to cross through. Breathe, listen. This is not confusion, it is transition. A discreet call to stop trying to fit where you no longer belong and to begin sustaining what has always quietly been yours. Perhaps the coffee tastes the same, yet the day does not. Perhaps the old conversations feel too narrow now, like clothes that no longer fit the size of your soul. Perhaps a calm desire to change small things has appeared, not from the haste to prove anything to anyone, but from the serenity of aligning with yourself. This is how it begins, not with thunderclaps, but with fine displacements. Not with certainties, but with a lucidity that dawns from silence itself. Discomfort is not the enemy, it is the messenger. It says you are not broken. You are growing, and growth sometimes aches. It aches to dissolve ancient pacts with survival. It aches to discover that a part of you, out of love for safety, learned to shrink. Today, however, your presence asks for another posture, not one that fights the past, but one that honors it, learns, and steps forward with dignity. There comes a moment when the mind tries to negotiate with the new. Not now, not like this, only after everything is under control. But the new does not arrive through control. It arrives through coherence. Your energy has already said yes, which is why the body, the habits, the circumstances, still a few steps behind, protest the rhythm. You are not late, you are early. This is why the outer world seems slow. It is always the last to comprehend a decision made by the heart. Meanwhile, the field around you reorganizes, quietly removing what no longer matches your vibration and creating space for what will soon recognize you by the truth you finally hold. Between one reality and the next, an interval opens. The emptiness, the silence. Many run, you do not. You begin to understand that this emptiness is not lack, it is cradle. It is where your next self begins to take form, and as that form sketches itself, the old world makes its final invitations. Familiarity soothes, routine seduces, justifications arrive disguised as prudence. Who do you think you are to change now? Whispers that voice. You answer with presence. I am the one who no longer needs permission to be. This is not blind rebellion. It is an inner elegance, the elegance of someone who has learned there is nothing to prove. The new does not require an audience. It requires posture. In the small gesture carved out of haste, you reposition yourself. A no, where there used to be hesitation. A yes, where there used to be fear. A silence where there used to be the compulsion to explain. This is how reality begins to bend, not by force, but by correspondence. The field responds to what you embody, not what you promise. Some around you may not understand, yet. That is not a mistake in the path. It is confirmation of it. When your frequency refines, bonds sustained only by habit lose their magnetism. There are no villains, no culprits, only rhythms. Some align, others take their bow. A quiet grief may arise for the version of you who fit easily, who was simple to explain. Let that version depart with honors. Your life is not collapsing. It is revealing the architecture that has always waited beneath. You do not need to demolish everything to begin again. You need rather to inhabit yourself so completely that what does not match withdraws for lack of nourishment. And if loneliness knocks for a moment, remember, it is not always absence. Often, it is space for your presence to dwell in its own home. Let us be clear, direct, gentle. Discomfort is data. It is proof your energy stands one step ahead of the scenery. When that gap prolongs, anxiety is born, not as a sentence, but as evidence of a birth in progress. Your task is not to accelerate the clock. It is to breathe while the new aligns its bones. You do not need guarantees. You need serene courage. Serene courage is the art of not abandoning yourself when the old narrative pleads for your return. It is staying faithful to the alignment you have just discovered while the world, still uninformed, offers shortcuts back to yesterday. Do not accept them. Not from stubbornness, but from reverence for the truth that visits you. Every time you choose what expands you, a possibility collapses into form. In simple terms, life understands you mean it, and because I care about your path, and because small gestures create long timelines, here is a quiet invitation that helps this work keep reaching you and those who need this steady voice. If this resonates, let the universe and the platform know you want more of this presence here. Tap like and subscribe. It takes seconds, and curiously, it has an aligning effect. You declare to yourself, I choose to remain in this field. Simple, natural, without fanfare, and we continue together. Hold this truth. You are not starting today. You are recognizing what has already begun, and recognition accelerates processes. From here, we will go deeper, gently and precisely, into why the same world no longer feels the same. How to welcome the emptiness without mistaking it for stagnation. How relationships and roles reorganize when your coherence grows. And how to retell your past as raw material rather than prison. Step by step, we will anchor small, powerful practices to stabilize your new timeline. If what you have read so far touched your chest, stay close. In the next topic, we will reveal the exact signal that distinguishes confusion from transition and how to use it to cross the threshold with grace. There is a moment, often quiet, almost private, when you realize the room you have known for years has not changed, and yet you cannot keep inhabiting it the way you did yesterday. The furniture is in place, the calendar repeats its predictable sequence, the conversations still follow the same grooves. But beneath the surface, the meanings have shifted. You reach for the old explanations and they no longer open the same doors. You put on the familiar mask and it sits awkwardly on your face. What you are meeting is not confusion. It is the dawning of a different coherence. The signal is subtle. Coffee tastes the same, but you drink it differently. You return to a task and notice your breath tightening for no apparent reason. Someone you adore begins to sound slightly out of rhythm with your inner metronome. None of this is a crisis.
It is the field rearranging its coordinates to reflect a decision your heart has already made.
The same world is not the same because you are no longer transmitting the same signal into it, and reality, faithful as a mirror, is adjusting its reply. Discomfort, then, is not an indictment. It is information. It says your energy is traveling one step ahead of your circumstances. At first, this can feel like dizziness, a soft fog at the edges of thought, a minor impatience with things you once tolerated, a tender ache where habits used to sit unquestioned. Stay with it. The mind will try to treat the signal as a problem to be solved, but the signal is a compass, not a siren. When you slow down enough to listen, you begin to hear what the data is telling you. The rhythm that used to carry you forward has completed its purpose, and a new rhythm is composing itself beneath your ribs. You are not late. You are early. The outer world is simply taking its time to harmonize with the music you have begun to hum under your breath. This is where many people turn back, not because they are weak, but because the signal asks for a quality of attention that modern life rarely rewards. The old rhythm offers certainty, known roles, practiced answers, reliable applause. The new rhythm offers truth, a fuller presence that may initially attract silence instead of praise. The temptation is to force the transition into visible results, announce a dramatic change, dismantle what is working, demand instant clarity from those around you. Yet the signal does not require spectacle. It requires fidelity. Your work is not to manufacture outcomes, but to remain faithful to what you have begun to hear. Fidelity looks like small, precise shifts, speaking with less performance and more sincerity, leaving a little earlier to protect your inner quiet, noticing where your body says no and allowing that no to be complete without apology. When choice follows signal, reality folds toward you with less friction, not because life becomes easy, but because you stop pushing against your own alignment. The language of this transition is resonance. In the physics of sound, when two frequencies match, they amplify one another without effort. In the physics of becoming, when your inner state and your outer choices begin to match, life amplifies your movement without struggle. The opposite is also true. When your internal signal diverges from your environment, decoherence sets in. You will feel it as boredom that no entertainment can soothe, as fatigue that sleep alone cannot resolve, as loneliness in crowded rooms. It can be tempting to label these sensations as failure or to medicate them into silence. But they are the precise signatures of a timeline shedding its final thin layer of glue. If you rush to paste that layer back on by over-explaining yourself, by agreeing to what you have outgrown, by shrinking to fit, you only postpone what is already ready. If instead you allow the adhesive to dry and release, you discover that nothing essential was lost. Only the fiction of who you had to be to belong. Understanding the signal does not mean the people around you will instantly understand it too. Some will feel the shift and cheer you on quietly. Others will feel the ground move under their feet and ask you to be who you were yesterday. Neither response defines your path. Your task is to keep your attention where your life is actually happening, at the seam between what you have mastered and what you are here to learn next. At that seam, certainty is a poor teacher. Curiosity is wiser. Curiosity asks simple, generous questions. What is this sensation trying to tell me about how I spend my time? Which words make my chest open when I speak them? Which routines once protected me and now prevent me? Clarity grows in the light of such questions, not in the heat of self-judgment. Little by little, the signal clarifies. You begin to recognize its tone as unmistakably your own. There will be days when the signal feels loud, and days when it feels thin. On the thin days, do not mistake quiet for absence. A lighthouse remains a lighthouse even when fog blurs its beam. It is enough to keep the lamp lit, one sincere act that honors the direction you have chosen. Perhaps it is the discipline of pausing before you answer, so your words carry the weight of your current truth rather than the momentum of your previous identity. Perhaps it is the softness of declining an invitation that belongs to a chapter you have already finished. Perhaps it is the courage of asking for help in a way you have never allowed yourself to ask. These are not small acts. They are how a timeline is rewritten without shouting. What then distinguishes confusion from transition? Confusion says, I do not know who I am, and I must find an identity quickly to feel safe. Transition says, I know who I am more clearly than ever, and I will let my life reconfigure at the speed of that knowing. Confusion scatters attention, seeking constant input. Transition gathers attention, seeking depth. Confusion insists on answers. Transition practices presence. Presence, in turn, amplifies the signal, and the amplified signal invites the world to meet you where you truly stand. When the world is slow to arrive, do not rush ahead to fetch it. Let it come. Your steadiness is the invitation. Before seguimos adiante, permita-me gesto pequeno e potente de ancoragem comunitária. If this section resonated and helped you name your own signal, choose one word that captures what you are feeling now. Perhaps alignment, threshold, courage, or a word of your own, and comment it below. Not for applause, but as a clear note in the field, a way of saying, to yourself and to those quietly walking with you, I hear the signal. One word only, simple and sincere. From here, we will step into the chamber most often misread as failure but known, pelos atentos, as origin. The sacred interval where nothing seems to move and yet everything is forming. In the next topic, we enter the void, not as emptiness to fear, but as the living cradle of your next self, and we will learn how to remain there without trying to fix what is not broken, so that what is true in you can take its first full breath. There is a chamber in every authentic transformation that does not look like progress. It looks like stillness. It sounds like silence. It feels at first touch like a room with no furniture, no familiar thoughts to sit on, no old stories to lean against, no easy distractions to keep you company while time passes. This chamber has many names: interval, gap, wilderness. But here we will call it what it is for those who recognize its dignity: the sacred void. It is not the punishment for wanting more. It is the preparation for holding more. The void is not what appears when life abandons you. It is what appears when life invites you to abandon what is not life. In this space, the old rhythm has finished its song, and the new rhythm has not yet found a voice. That is why it feels so quiet. That is why the mind, addicted to noise as proof, calls it failure. But the void does not fail you. It gestates you. At first, the void can feel like a loss of appetite for what used to satisfy. The book closes sooner. The conversation ends earlier. The habit no longer provides its familiar sweetness. You try to recreate yesterday's relief and the recipe refuses to cooperate. This is not numbness. It is refinement. Taste buds of the soul changing, growing subtle, learning to distinguish sugar from nourishment. The body too begins to speak differently. It asks for slowness where you once demanded speed. It requests water when your routine offered only caffeine. It leans toward the window not to escape but to breathe. Notice these urges. They are not mere preferences. They are revelations, tiny edicts from the part of you that already knows where you are going and understands what will be required to live there without collapsing under the weight of new. Light, the most difficult hours in the void are the ones in which nothing appears to move. You will look at the clock and the numbers will behave, but time will feel like a lake without wind. In those hours, the mind brings a suitcase of old propositions. Perhaps you should announce a fresh plan. Perhaps you should change cities. Perhaps you should run headlong into an extreme decision so the silence can be drowned by applause. Yet any decision made to escape the void is a decision that delays who you are becoming. The void is not a corridor to rush through. It is a sanctuary to inhabit with reverence. When you sit inside it without the anesthesia of constant doing, you begin to hear the deeper metabolism of your life. You notice that the quiet is not empty, it hums. It has texture, temperature, a subtle gravity. When you stop demanding that the next chapter introduce itself on your schedule, you start to feel the ink warming under the page. This is the paradox. While the surface seems still, the foundations are being poured. The blueprint of your next identity is being drafted in a language older than words. Old loyalties are being reviewed, those covenants you made with exhaustion, with self-minimization, with the false safety of predictability. The void asks gentle but unrelenting questions. Must you keep paying approval for a home you never truly liked living in? Must you keep borrowing urgency from fear when presence is offering you credit without interest? Must you keep proving what is already true? In the quiet, these questions are not accusations. They are invitations to a slower honesty. And as honesty ripens, your nervous system learns that calm is not the absence of responsibility. It is the presence of alignment. You discover that stillness is not the enemy of momentum. It is momentum changing state, from visible motion into invisible organization. Because the void is sacred, it resists performance. It will not reveal its gifts if you enter it as a stage. It opens when you enter it as a sanctuary, and sanctuaries alter those who cross their threshold. You may find yourself cleaning your space in a way that feels ceremonial rather than compulsive, as if every folded fabric were a small vow to care for what cares for you. You may begin speaking more slowly, not to appear wise, but because you can finally hear the weight of your words. You may feel drawn to reduce your intake, not as punishment, but as an act of fidelity to the clarity that is forming in you. The void is not impressed by grand gestures. It delights in precise attention. A single honest breath taken at the edge of a reactive habit can move more destiny than a dozen proclamations shouted into the wind. This is how the void trains you. It invites you to discover that power is the quiet companion of coherence, not the loud cousin of control. You will notice, too, that the void rearranges your relationship to desire. In the old rhythm, desire oscillated between scarcity and excess. Either you denied what you wanted to avoid disappointment, or you demanded it immediately to avoid uncertainty. Inside the void, desire matures. It stops shouting for outcomes and starts asking for states, integrity, depth, truth, peace, creativity that is not a spectacle but a sacrament. From there, choices become clear without fanfare. You do not need to convince yourself to leave the room that has no oxygen. You simply recognize that your lungs were made for air. You do not need to manufacture courage to speak the one sentence that frees you. You simply understand that silence would cost you more than honesty ever could. In this maturation, desire becomes devotion, not a hunger that drags you, but a hearth that warms you while you learn to carry your own flame. Perhaps the most tender rite of passage in the void is learning to be seen by no one and still feel real. When applause quiets and witnesses are few, an ancient fear awakens. If no one is looking, do I exist? The void answers softly, you exist most where no one can see you. For there, you cannot outsource your belonging to an audience. You anchor it in the living center of your being. You come to understand that privacy is not the enemy of purpose. It is the smithy where purpose is forged without distortion. You learn to touch your life without the glove of constant explanation, to let a day be a prayer without broadcasting its amen. When, in time, you return from the void carrying the shape it gave you, your presence will read as unmistakably true. People will search for the method and miss the marrow. They will call it luck or timing or talent. You will know it by its proper name, coherence. None of this romanticizes the ache. The void can be exquisitely uncomfortable. It strips away the ornaments of identity until only the structure remains, and that bareness can feel like winter. But winter, too, is a sanctuary. Roots deepen, seeds harden, sap learns patience. If you can bear the clean cold of this season without rushing to import a false spring, you will emerge with a strength that does not need spectacle to be certain. Your attention will be less available for the small emergencies that padded your days. Your voice will ring with a sincerity that requires fewer words to be heard. Your boundaries will stop resembling fences and start resembling doors, not barriers to the world, but frames that tell the truth about what your house is for. And then something quiet and unmistakable happens. The void, which once felt like the absence of movement, begins to breathe with you. You feel a click, sometimes a delicate one, like a key turning in a lock you did not know you carried. The simplest tasks begin to feel newly proportioned to your hands. The room you left has not changed, but your posture has. You no longer need to force your way through the day. You inhabit it. What once required friction now asks only for presence. This is the first hint that gestation is giving way to birth, not a spectacle of fireworks, but the steady arrival of form. The next self has bones now. It has a voice. It has preferences that feel less like rules and more like reverence. You did not manufacture this. You made space for it. From here, it is natural that the world around you begins to respond. The void does not keep you isolated. It returns you differently related. And this is where the story often grows tender and complicated. As coherence increases, not every bond survives the altitude. In the next topic, we will step into the delicate geography of social misalignment and repositioning. Why some relationships loosen while others deepen. How to grieve the versions of you that once fit. And how to walk through the valley of invisibility with elegance, without apologizing for the truth you now carry. There comes a season in every true transition when you discover that growth is not merely an internal affair. It has a social temperature. The atmosphere around you, made of conversations, customs, shared histories, and unspoken contracts, begins to feel slightly out of climate with your new interior weather. People you love still laugh at the same lines. Gatherings still unfold in the same rooms. Your role is still waiting where you left it. And yet the fit has loosened, as if the costume you once wore with ease now drapes from a body that has quietly changed its proportions. This is not betrayal of your people, nor treason against your past. It is physics. When a signal changes, all receivers tuned to the old frequency must either retune or fade into static. The heart understands this before the mind does. The mind calls it loss. The heart calls it honesty. Honesty, however, has a tenderness to it that cannot be rushed. Many of the bonds that feel strange in your hands today were the very bridges that carried you through older storms. There is a loyalty you will want to pay, an instinct to stay a little longer so no one is startled by your unfolding. But there is a difference between loyalty and self-abandonment. Loyalty keeps faith with love. Self-abandonment keeps an old image intact at the cost of your aliveness. The art here is subtle. You can let an identity retire without withdrawing your affection. You can decline a familiar invitation without renouncing your gratitude. To practice this art is to learn a new etiquette of departure, the quiet dignity with which you step out of a room that no longer has the oxygen your lungs require, leaving the door ajar so the draft of your sincerity is felt rather than the slam of your defense. As coherence increases, your system stops accepting the small bargains that once held entire chapters together. You begin to notice where you used politeness to mask exhaustion, where you used helpfulness to hide resentment, where you used humor to avoid saying, "I'm not available for this anymore." In the beginning, the sentence sticks in your throat. Then, with practice, it acquires weight and warmth. Not an argument, not a courtroom statement, simply a boundary spoken in human voice. Boundaries spoken from fear arrive as walls. Boundaries spoken from coherence arrive as frames, telling the truth about what your house is for. Some will understand immediately. Others will test the frame, not out of malice, but out of habit. Remember, habits are not villains. They are grooves. And grooves are recarved by repetition, not by rage. It is common, during this recarving, to experience a period of invisibility. The circles that once applauded your reliable performance may grow quiet when you stop performing. Do not mistake the quiet for rejection. Often it is recalibration. People who only knew the version of you who accepted every role will need time to meet the version who chooses with care. Some will not come to that meeting. This too is natural. Systems organize around predictability. When one member changes, the system trembles, reaches for the old anchor, and if it does not find it, may drift to attach elsewhere. Allow it. You are not responsible for being everyone's anchor. You are responsible for being faithful to the current that is finally carrying you home. It can hurt to release a role that earned you belonging, but the belonging you purchased with performance was always conditional, and a conditional home is a long layover, not a destination. Grief, then, is not a sign you have chosen wrongly. It is the proof that you are a person who can love without possession. Let yourself grieve the ease of yesterday, the shorthand of relationships that required less explanation, the comfort of being easily categorized. Grieve, too, the versions of you who stayed longer than they should have out of kindness, or fear, or naive hope that everyone could come along at the same pace. They did the best they knew. Offer them thanks and set them down. In grief's honest light, you will notice something else taking shape, a wider capacity for gentleness. The person who learns to leave without hardening, learns to arrive without pushing. You become the kind of presence whose authenticity makes grand speeches unnecessary. You do not have to announce that you have changed. Your atmosphere tells the truth on your behalf. Repositioning is not only about who falls away, it is also about who appears. As your field steadies, you begin to attract resonance rather than chase it. Conversations that used to require effort start finding you with no marketing, only magnetism. A book surfaces at the exact hour your question matures. A mentor appears not as a savior but as a mirror. A friend, previously on the periphery, reveals a depth that had no place to land in your life until now. This is not magic in the theatrical sense. It is correspondence. When you stop spending your attention on roles you have outgrown, attention returns to you with compound interest, and you invest it where your breath opens. The economy of your heart becomes more intelligent. You no longer loan yourself to rooms that cannot afford the price of your truth. Still, there will be negotiations. You will sit at tables where old scripts are waiting in the center like folded napkins. Someone will hand you yours with a smile that says, "We always loved you for this." You will feel the temptation to be generous in the old way, to play the role a final time, to make the evening easy for everyone. Some nights you will. Let this not be a failure but a study. Notice how your body feels the morning after. Not to punish yourself, but to refine your literacy. Refinement yields a different kind of generosity. You begin to offer what is most you, not what earns the quickest praise. You tell the truth sooner, more simply. You stay when staying is alive. You leave before leaving becomes an act of self-violence. There is a nobility in this precision that no spotlight can imitate. One of the hardest truths to accept is that clarity can be lonely at first. Not because clarity isolates, but because it requires a pause between who you were with others and who you are with yourself. In that pause, your nervous system relearns safety without constant external confirmation. You teach your body that a room can feel empty, and you still belong to yourself in it. You teach your voice that a sentence can be short and still be complete. You teach your eyes to recognize invitations not by how urgently they wave, but by how deeply they align. What grows here is sovereignty, the quiet authority of someone who does not ask permission to be honest. Sovereignty is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is recognized by the ease with which you decline what costs you the center and the ease with which you welcome what strengthens it. If you have children, partners, colleagues, or elders walking near you while you change, let your repositioning educate without shaming. Model the difference between compromise and erasure. Demonstrate that a relationship can stretch, and in stretching, either find a wiser elasticity or reveal a seam that was always meant to give. Speak less about how others should behave, and more about how you will care for your own coherence. Offer clear, kind updates rather than justifications. I am handling my evenings differently now. I will not be available for this conversation in that tone. I love you, and this pattern does not belong in my future. People rarely remember our arguments. They remember our atmosphere when we speak. Make yours breathable. All of this rearrangement sets a stage for a deeper act of mercy, the one you will offer your own history. Because once you stop pleading with the present to pretend it is still yesterday, you can finally look at yesterday without bargaining. You begin to see how the roles you are releasing were once sacred, how the masks now tiring to hold were once medicine. And from that seeing, blame loosens. What remains is material, raw, instructive, potent material. In the next topic, we will step across that threshold into a quantum rereading of the past, where nothing is wasted, and every detour proves to be a line in the blueprint of your becoming, not as a story you must forever defend, but as a living archive you are now strong enough to bless and to use. There is a way of looking backward that tightens the chest and makes the road ahead feel narrow. It is the gaze of grievance, cataloguing wrong turns, tallying delays, treating memory like a courtroom in which you are always both the defendant and the judge. This gaze is understandable. It evolves from the instinct to protect ourselves by naming what hurt. But there is another way of looking, older than blame and wiser than denial. A gaze that loosens the breath and widens the horizon. It is the quantum rereading of the past. In this rereading, events do not line up like soldiers in a parade of cause and effect. They arrange themselves like constellations, revealing patterns only visible from the altitude of your present awareness. The same moments that once appeared as punishments begin to show their curriculum. The detours that seem to cost you time disclose the competencies they quietly bestowed. Patience that no book could teach. Discernment earned in the dark. A tenderness for struggle that makes you trustworthy with other people's pain. Under this gaze, the past stops being a weight and becomes a workshop. To enter this workshop, you do not need to adopt a smiley mythology that calls everything perfect. Perfection is not required for transformation. Honesty is. Honesty says, here is where I broke trust with myself, here is where I stayed too long, here is where fear wore the mask of prudence and I gave it the keys. Honesty also says, here is where I did the best I could with the nervous system I had. Here is where I learned the contours of my limits. Here is where love tried to speak, and I did not yet know its language. When honesty is paired with presence, shame loses its favorite furniture. It has nowhere to sit. What remains is information, clean, precise, actionable. In a quantum frame, information is not just mental content. It is energy that reorganizes the field. When you reinterpret a memory without the old charge, you do more than think differently. You change the frequency that memory emits every time you touch it, and therefore you change what it summons from the world when your life rhymes with it again. Consider the seasons you call wasted. The job that dulled you, the relationship that shrank you, the habit you couldn't outgrow until it finally frightened you into sobriety. Look closely, and you will find a seam of gold running through each, skills invisible on resumes, grit no certificate can verify, clarity forged like iron under the hammer of repetition. The year you spent stuck was not a blank page. It was a slow apprenticeship in what you must never again negotiate away. The heartbreak that shattered your plans did not only end a romance, it exposed the architecture of your attachment and invited you to build on bedrock rather than on borrowed scaffolding. Even your procrastination had a pedagogy. It taught you where desire was counterfeit, where the task was misaligned, where your inner critic shouted so loudly that silence felt safer than beginning. None of this absolves us of responsibility. It equips us for it. Responsibility is lighter when carried by someone who knows how they were made. You may ask, if nothing is wasted, why did it hurt so much? Because pain is the body's most persuasive tutor, and certain truths will not enter us through the polite door. They require a crack to slip through, the crack made by endings we did not plan, by failures we could not public relations our way around, by nights that bent the spine of our self-concept until it learned to bow. In the old narrative, those nights were evidence that life was against you. In the reread narrative, they are evidence that life was insisting you become unfalsifiable, someone who can stand in the center without needing the world to clap. This is not romance about suffering. It is literacy about growth. Literate people stop asking for lives that never ache. They ask for spines that can hold the ache without breaking faith. Breakdown in this light reveals itself as the deconstruction of incoherence. Think of your life as a structure, beams of belief, walls of routine, windows of relationship, a roof of identity under which you shelter. When the load-bearing truths weaken, the structure must either be reinforced or dismantled. If dismantling happens, it can look and feel like collapse. Dust in your lungs, splinters in your hands, the embarrassing noise of what was once impressive coming down. But what is actually occurring is a demolition of what could not carry who you are becoming. The crew is not your enemy. It is your future sending help. And the land left behind, raw, open, startling in its emptiness, is not a void to fear. It is a foundation awaiting a blueprint with better math. What, then, do you do with the artifacts of former chapters? Photos from rooms you should not have entered? Messages to people you would not choose today? Trophies from victories that required too much self-erasure? You treat them like exhibits in a museum you curate with care. A museum does not display artifacts to glorify the past. It displays them to teach context. You do not need to burn every relic to prove you have changed. You need to give each its proper placard. This was the mask I wore when I believed love was earned by performance. This was the script I followed when safety meant invisibility. This was the laughter that hid the room where I cried. When labeled with clarity rather than shame, artifacts lose their spell. They become references, useful, contained, even tender to touch, because they no longer threaten to re-enlist you into a life you have resigned from. In rereading the past, forgiveness becomes less a verdict and more a physics lesson. Not all wrongs can be balanced by apology, not all debts can be paid in the currency of conversation. But energy can be released. Holding a grudge is like asking your nervous system to carry a battery you never use. Heavy, corrosive, slowly leaking into every pocket of attention. Release does not mean forgetting. It means you stop giving your future to the maintenance of what cannot be repaired by time travel. You reallocate power. The moment you withdraw the voltage of resentment, attention returns to your hands. With attention you can build. Without attention you can only rehearse. Rereading also transforms the way you measure progress. In the old paradigm, progress is a staircase visible to onlookers, titles, numbers, milestones. In the quantum paradigm, progress is a stabilization of frequency. How consistently you can remain yourself while contexts shift, how quickly you return to center when jolted, how quietly you can choose alignment without requiring witnesses. By this measure, the day you declined an argument that would have proven you right but cost you your peace was a greater leap than the week you went viral. The morning you noticed the first ache of overgiving and adjusted your schedule before resentment brewed was a more faithful success than the month you outran your exhaustion and called it productivity. Your life begins to shine in places no spotlight reaches, and paradoxically, that inner shine refines the kind of light you're willing to stand under in public. Perhaps you worry that rereading the past with compassion will soften your edge, that without the spur of self-critique you will drift back into old patterns. Look closely. Contempt never kept you aligned. It kept you obedient to whoever first taught you that love must be earned by improvement. Compassion is not a hall pass for repetition. It is a clean mirror. In a clean mirror, you cannot pretend the smudge is someone else's fingerprint. You see your part with more precision, not less. Precision shortens the distance between insight and correction. It lets you say, I understand why I did that. And here is exactly how I will do it differently now. instead of "I am terrible," which is a sentence that solves nothing and secretly asks for consolation instead of change. When you reread the past, you begin to notice messages from your future threaded through it. Times you almost chose yourself but did not. Invitations you declined because you could not yet carry their weight. Moments of spontaneous courage that felt like anomalies then and look like breadcrumbs now. These are not regrets to nurse. They are coordinates to chart. You can return to the scene, not physically, but energetically, and complete the sentence you could not speak before. You can call back a fragment of self-respect left on a kitchen table years ago. You can thank your younger self for surviving with the tools they had and introduce them gently to the better tools you carry now. This is not magical thinking. It is how coherence feels when it moves both forward and backward across a timeline, gathering what belongs to you and returning it to the center. None of this rereading requires an audience. Some of the most consequential acts of liberation happen without witnesses. You throw away a script no one knew you were reading from. You delete a number you used to dial when loneliness masqueraded as love. You place a hand on your heart and tell the truth out loud in an empty room. Reality listens. Not as a mystical reward system, but as a lawful correspondence. The field answers the frequency you stabilize. And when the past is no longer a swamp that sucks your steps, but a reservoir that waters your roots, your gait changes. You walk with the unhurried weight of someone who trusts their own seasons, someone who will not buy a future by pawning their center, someone who can carry joy without fearing it will cost them their vigilance. There comes a quiet minute, often after the questions tire themselves out, when you realize you were never waiting for a sign. You were waiting for permission. Not from the world, from yourself. You have walked with us through the threshold where the same world no longer feels the same, across the sacred void where form gestates in stillness, through the tender rearrangements of relationship and role, and into a rereading of your past, where nothing was wasted and everything became material. If you listen closely, you can hear the pattern. The signal appears, the void receives, the field reorganizes, and the story you tell about who you are loosens its old knots. This is not a promise of a perfect future. It is the arrival of a truer present, and a truer present is the doorway through which every sustainable future enters. What you have been feeling is not confusion. It is coherence gathering itself. That ache in your chest when you try to pretend you still fit where you have outgrown. That strange lightness when you tell one honest no and the room becomes breathable. That unglamorous courage that lets you sit through the silence without inventing a crisis. These are not side notes. They are the central notes of a new score. In a quantum frame, reality answers the signal you stabilize. You have been tuning, perhaps without applause, certainly without guarantees, yet the field has heard you. The proof is subtle but reliable. Less friction in what is aligned, less appetite for what cost you the center, more clarity in fewer words. This is progress that doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. Let the past rest with honors. It trained your attention, tempered your heart, and introduced you to the exact edges you now refuse to cross. Its artifacts no longer recruit you. They inform you. The future, for its part, is not a distant rescue. It is a frequency you are already learning to hold, quietly, consistently, in rooms with no witnesses. When you forget, return to the simplest disciplines. Breathe before answering. Choose the smaller true thing over the bigger impressive thing. Let tired roles retire without indictment. These are not tiny acts. They are levers. Each one tilts the timeline by degrees you will notice first in your nervous system and then, almost shyly in your circumstances. If you need a sentence to take with you, let it be this: you are not behind, you are early, and that is why the world feels slow. Do not bargain your new rhythm for quick relief. Do not translate your clarity into a spectacle to earn permission you no longer require. Stand quietly where your life is most honest and let reality find you by the signal you now emit. There will be days of fog and days of sunrise. Both belong to the same journey. On fog days, keep the lamp lit. On sunrise days, receive the warmth without rehearsing the winter. This is how a life steadies, not by dramatic reinventions, but by faithful coherences accumulating until momentum changes state. If this message resonated, if it steadied your breath or named what you could not quite say, I invite you to stay close to this field we're building together. Tap subscribe and turn on notifications so these quiet, precise reminders reach you when you most need them. And if you felt supported today, a simple like tells the platform and tells you that this is the kind of nourishment you choose to keep. Thank you for your presence, your sincerity, and the courage it takes to change without an audience. Carry this steadiness back into your day and let the next right honest step meet you. Until we meet again, be well, stay aligned, and keep listening to the whisper that brought you here.